Hi guys, and welcome to a Hector lecture guide to the Unending Coil of Bahamut ads phase. This is the fourth video in a series of 5 videos breaking down the entirety of the ultimate fight Unending Coil of Bahamut. If you haven't watched my previous 3 videos on Twintanya phase, Nail phase, and Bahamut phase, I recommend giving those a watch to understand the mechanics better before taking a look at this one. Assuming you've managed to survive Grand Octet at the end of Bahamut phase, regardless of if you met the DPS check, you get to experience Ad phase. The stage will transition, Bahamut will spawn just north of the arena, causing a giant glowing wall of effects behind him. Both Twin and Nail will reappear, and Bahamut will imbue them with power. This will lead Twintanya to come back to life with 40% HP, and Nail with 45% HP. Be aware that throughout this entire phase, you're going to have a constantly ticking ethereal attunement bar that will just increase naturally over time. If this bar ever gets to 100, the boss will enrage and it's game over. I recommend starting the fight by having your tanks move these bosses away from north. While it seems like a convenient location, the giant glowing wall behind Bahamut makes it incredibly difficult to see things if you're constantly facing that way. I recommend pulling the boss towards the seaway mark, with one tank taking each of the bosses. The bosses will both naturally aggro towards whoever had aggro at the end of Bahamut phase, so whichever tank was not responsible for Bahamut is going to need to provoke one of them. Stack them on top of each other, but face them away from one another because the first mechanic you get is the mini tank busters. Make sure that whoever's tanking Twin faces that plummet away from the rest of the party and nobody has stood behind them so they don't get cleaved. Have your ranged player, whoever was responsible for baiting Liquid Hells back in Twintanya phase, out to also bait more Liquid Hells because they'll get targeted by Liquid Hells here. Make sure everybody else is close enough to Twin to not accidentally bait these, as they're a real pain to deal with if they're not out of the way. As the 5th Liquid Hell lands, 3 DPS will be targeted with a hatch. Now, because this will always target 3 of the 4 DPS, we can actually have 3 of our DPS have a set location that they always go to as their Neuralink. The melee should be going to the ones in between on either side of the boss, and your ranged Liquid Hellbait should always be taking the Neuralink opposite the bosses. Now, for your 4th DPS, in this case R2, they're the flex. They look who doesn't have the marker, and they're going to cover their Neuralink. If you happen to be the one who doesn't have it, and you're on voice calls, you can call out your waymark. In this case, M1 would shout 3 to let that person know quickly and easily where they should go to. There's a twister during this triple hatch, but the timing's weird. For the 2 players that are in the Neuralinks right next to the bosses, they're likely going to have their hatch explode before the twister goes off, so they should start in the Neuralink and dodge out of it. The far player, in this case R1, is instead going to deal with the twister first and then have the hatch explode after they dodge it. Everyone else deals with the twister as normal. Here, the melee M2 and R2 have just exploded. Now they're going to dodge out to deal with the twister, while R1 dodges in. Immediately after this happens, watch out because Nail's about to hit you with a quote. Well, one of 4 possible quotes. While this seems like a lot of different ways to deal with it, there's a lot of similarities between these. You'll see that every single one is just a combination of in, out, stack, and spread. Let's go over how to deal with each of these. You're only going to get one of them right now, but you want to be prepared for all 4. If you happen to get the quote that says this, from Hallowed Moon I descend upon burning earth to tread, this is an in, followed by a spread, followed by a stack. Deal with it like this. You'll note that not everybody's gone in. Whichever player is on the far Neuralink will actually have an easier time dodging this if they outrange the donut attack as opposed to trying to rush in. Follow this up by spreading. This is the same essential spread that we did, tanks then healers then melee then ranged, back in Bahamut phase, but with the tanks positioned closer towards the bosses and moving away from it. We're doing the spread around middle to make it easy enough for everybody to reach their positions. After the spread hits, immediately stack due middle of the arena to deal with the thermionic beam stack. There's always a twister immediately following the 3rd mechanic. In this case, just spread back in the direction you just came from to naturally dodge this. If you happen to get the quote that says, "This from hallowed moon I bear iron in my descent to wield," this is an in, followed by an out, followed by a spread. Have your group dodge the in the same way as before. Immediately get away. If you can go to your spread position, do it immediately. Otherwise, if you have to dodge the out first, then adjust your spread, do so. Finally, continue to move towards the edge of the arena wherever you are to dodge the twister and not run into anyone else's. If you get the quote that says, "Unbending iron, descend with fiery edge," this is out, followed by spread, followed by stack. Immediately dodge out, and just like before, go to your spread position if you can do. Adjust your spread afterwards, and then collapse to do middle to stack. For the twister, go back where you just came from to dodge this without running through anyone else's. Finally, if you get the quote that says, "Unbending iron, take fire and descend," this is an out, followed by a stack, followed by a spread. This is, in my opinion, the easiest of the 4 possible quotes. For the first 2, immediately just stack do middle. You'll dodge the out, and you won't have to move for the stack. Afterwards, go to your standard spread positions around middle, and continue moving in the direction you were just going in to dodge the twister. Whichever of the 4 quotes you get, deal with it as shown, and then group up together ready for a Mega Flare. This is a hard-hitting raid-wide cast by Nail, so mitigate this appropriately to make sure that you can survive it, as you might be low health following the probable stack that you get from the quote. After Mega Flare, both of the tanks are going to get targeted by the big tank buster from each of the ads. This requires them to pop at least 2 cooldowns. I recommend using one of your longer ones like Rampart and combining it with your short class-specific cooldown. These also both require swap, so have each tank provoke the other ad to have the swap happen. I also recommend having the tank swap positions to keep the bosses in place and also make dodging future cleaves easier. Immediately after this heavy tank buster, the bosses are going to use their mini tank buster again. This is why I recommended using Rampart, as it will cover both. Make sure that whoever's now tanking Twin avoids cleaving anybody with the plummet. And now things repeat. R1 should be back out, ready to bait the Liquid Hells. 3 players get targeted with the hatch. They go to their respective spots. If they're in a near Neuralink, they need to immediately go in and dodge the twister afterwards. If they're in the far Neuralink, they're going to deal with the twister and then take their hatch. Everyone else dodges the twister as normal. And immediately afterwards, you're going to get one of the 4 quotes. I'll just show the one this time. Here we have the in spread stack. So the group goes in, those that can get in. They spread around middle. And then they collapse into middle of stack before going back to their previous positions to dodge the twister. Afterwards, watch your tank's health, as they're going to have to deal with a Raven's Beak and a Death Sentence again. Use the cooldowns that you've got left. Maybe your 90-second, or your 2-minute cooldown in addition to the short cooldown, which should be back. If you survive both of these, don't forget that you do need to swap, otherwise you'll die to the next auto. Nail's going to cast another Mega Flare for you to heal through, and this is a great time to try to fight against the enrage of these bosses. With them both stacked up, you will hopefully have generated a decent amount of LB, depending on what you brought in with you. This is a great time to use LB for either caster or ranged, because if the bosses are down below 3%, this will kill both of them simultaneously. However you deal with it, survive and heal and mitigate through the Mega Flare, and then start to DPS down the bosses because you've got limited time left before they will enrage. If you manage to kill one of them, be aware that you've only got about 3 seconds before the other one will finish a cast of either White Fury or Twin Fury, which will res the other one back to full health and serve as essentially an enrage. If you manage to kill the other ad before they manage to finish their enrage cast, you have successfully cleared ad phase. Stack your group up in the middle, and you'll see that Bahamut will start to cast Terra Flare. As the countdown finishes, regardless of how well you've done in this phase, Bahamut will cast Terra Flare, a massive explosion will go off, and your entire party will be dead. Don't worry. As long as you kill the ads with Ethereal Attunement below 100, this is not the end of your fight, and get ready for the final phase of UCoB. Thanks for watching my guide. I hope you found this useful. As always, if you've got any questions, comments, or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Take care.